Welcome back to the Marketing Quacks podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Doser. If you're new to the show, the Marketing Quacks podcast mission is to expose the sliminess and all the scams that come in the marketing industry, especially in 2023 with these big agencies scamming clients. But today I'm very excited to have a guest, Audrey Boyce. Now, Audrey Boyce is our Vice President of Public Relations at Empathy First Media. She has years of experience in the PR world and has landed some of our clients on big publications such as Fox News, News Nation, Epic Times, Medical News Today, and so much more that she'll dive into. Audrey, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, so let's just do a brief intro about you. I just did a very brief intro saying about your experience in the PR world. I just want to hear about a quick background of your experience and what led you into PR and where you're at now.
Yeah, so I actually started in healthcare. I have a degree in nursing, so I kind of started in that industry, and I really just needed a change and a change of pace per se, and so I landed into PR very, very randomly, and kind of worked my way into leaving healthcare, into like a full-time setting in PR. And the biggest thing was just realizing that I could help people through like a different avenue. Big reason that I loved healthcare was helping people. So now I'm just helping people in a different capacity. That's kind of how I got into PR and how I became like a full-time publicist.
Yeah, and I'll say just from someone looking above here, Audrey has done very well so far since she joined Empathy First Media. This would have been back in October, correct, Audrey?
End of September, yeah.
End of September, yeah, right around that time. And she's already landed our clients, like I said, in Fox News, News Nation, Epic Times, these big publications. So she's definitely been doing a great job for sure. So let me ask you this. Someone who is a potential client who's on the fence of maybe getting into PR, is not really sure what PR can do for them in terms of an ROI, what would be kind of your pitch for someone who's exploring PR, and what are some of the benefits that you see of PR as a marketing strategy in 2023 and beyond?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is people have this misconception that PR is for rich people, it's for famous people, that famous people are going to be the only ones that are in these big publications. But it's really all about building your brand. If somebody's going to come to your business and they Google you and they see that you're in Yahoo or MSN or Medical News Today or things like that, you automatically gain more credibility. So I think it's important to note that as we go into a time of uncertainty, people that are in these news publications are going to get the clients, the patients, and things like that because they are proving their credibility through the media. So I think that's the biggest one.
Yeah, and I will say, too, we talk about this behind the scenes a lot, where PR also helps the SEO quite a bit, too. Where it adds the backlinks when you get these 70, 80, 90-plus DRDA backlinks from a News Nation, from an Epic Times, from a Medical News Today. We just got a backlink, kudos to you, from Medical News Today on our cash-based medical client that was a 90 DR and is extremely relevant. So I want to point that out, too, where it's obviously you're getting the quick bump in PR and you're getting the news and all the push that comes from that. But on the back end, you're getting the link juice and the backlink profile that comes from PR, which I personally believe is the bulletproof strategy for SEO and content marketing going forward in 2023. Any further comments on that?
I just think that it's important to note that not everybody knows what PR is and they don't understand the benefit. So you speaking to an SEO perspective, it kind of gives it even more credibility that when you're in the media, especially in these big publications or even industry specific in your industry, it looks better for you and it looks like you know what you're talking about, and that's our job, is to build your media credibility so people know that you know your stuff and you're the go-to expert in that field.
For sure. And the name of the game too, Audrey, and what I have a lot of respect for you in PR is you've started to build relationships with reporters too, right? Mm-hmm. So can you talk about, what is the ultimate game plan to be a very good PR strategist in 2023 and beyond? What are some tips and tricks for what you do that could, help our clients land on these big publications?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I tell people coming into PR as a PR professional is build those relationships and maintain them. You can't work with a reporter one time and then not maintain that relationship. So I've been very successful in the healthcare industry, and part of that is because I check in with my reporters that I've worked with consistently all the time. I'm constantly saying, hey, can I help you with anything? And they're humans too. And so you just have to talk to them like they're a human, and you kind of build that relationship and you become to the point where they know that your sources are credible, they know your sources are good. And so that's my biggest piece of advice for anybody coming in the industry is work on and really focus on those relationships. And as you build them, you and your clients will benefit from that relationship because they trust you and they trust your clients.
For sure. And you think about how many pitches some of these reporters get for a given story. Not only can
Yes.
you bypass that if you have the relationship, but, standing out from the crowd when a reporter's getting 50 to 100 pitches for a story. Talk about pitching a little bit, and what have you done or noticed that makes your pitches stand out over someone else?
I think my biggest thing with pitching is that people try to make it too complicated, and unfortunately, the reporter doesn't have time for a complicated pitch. You have to deliver your message in a quick and efficient way, and if you do that, the reporter is going to look at it. That goes also back to the relationship. If they see my name in their inbox and we've worked together 10 times, they're more likely to open my email and to respond to it versus someone they've never worked with before, and that comes with trust. And so I think the biggest thing is keeping your pitches short and sweet, and also understanding the industry that your client is and being able to pitch a reporter that is going to write on something in that industry.
For sure. No, that building those relationships is absolutely critical from what I've seen in what we do in our day-to-day. So moving on to another side of PR, what are some of the, would you say, the gimmicks, or I guess some of the downsides of PR that you see where some people land in these Forbes Business Advisors or these huge publications and it makes them look extremely credible? Because this is a Marketing Quacks podcast, so we have to expose things that when we see it come up, right? So explain to me, in your world of PR, what are some gimmicks that you see?
The biggest one, and probably the most prevalent one, is guaranteed media placements. Any PR agency that is offering guaranteed media, they're paying for it, and nobody can guarantee you a Forbes placement. So if you are looking to start PR and you go to an agency and they say, I'm going to guarantee you on TV, I'm going to guarantee you in Forbes, they're not. They're paying for it. And that's important, because then you get to the point where it's lying, and so you want to make sure you find a PR agency that's completely transparent. Forbes is never going to happen overnight. It's never going to, usually, I won't say never, but it usually doesn't even happen in the first month. So if they're guaranteeing media, automatically run the other way.
No, I love that.
The other one that I was just going to touch on, Ryan, was that if you being able to meet your team before you actually sign anything, or I know a lot of PR agencies do contracts, but they don't actually meet their team before they sign that contract. And so I think meeting your team, knowing who's going to be pitching you, and making sure that there's going to be a good relationship between the PR professional and the client, that's incredibly important. If they're not willing to let you meet your team, there's probably a reason.
Yeah, absolutely. There's always gimmicks in marketing and PR especially. Everything is pay to play from what I've seen in the PR world, especially with the Forbes Business Advisor, the guaranteed placements.
Definitely.
Everything is pay to play. And as a general, potential client who comes to a website and they see number one agency on here, we guarantee this placement, we guarantee that placement, you're not going to know any different because you don't actually know how PR works. And if someone's guaranteeing you
Right.
Fox News and Forbes, you're going to think, wow, I can get in Fox News and Forbes if I pay these guys 5, 8, 10 grand a month sometimes, right? So I'm glad that you called that out. The other thing I want to jump into, Audrey, is, going back to the benefits of PR. Let's talk about, as a client who is like maybe on the fence of PR, potentially onboarding, what are some of the good, characteristics that you see in a good PR client?
I think the biggest thing is, what is their niche? What do they want to talk about? And are they willing to kind of go outside of that wheelhouse? Obviously not anything crazy, but I'll give you an example for healthcare. If they do cancer and they're willing to talk about, primary care a little bit or something outside their wheelhouse, you're more willing to be, the more willing you are, the better we can place you. And I say that because I go back to media credibility. If you've never been in the news, you have to build that credibility. And we do that sometimes by not being as picky as I would be with a client that's been my client for a year. So I definitely think it's about the niche. You have to find the right niche. Healthcare, law, tech, any of those big niches, they're amazing, and we can place you, and that's probably the biggest thing. The other thing is being able to talk on camera and being able to get on a podcast, because we don't just do articles, we do everything. So having you be ready to jump on camera and know what you're doing and being able to hold a conversation about your industry is super important.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I was going to bring up media credibility is actually my next question. Is when people get into PR, they just expect the giant placements right away, right? We're like, I want to be in Forbes, I want to be in Fox News, News Nation, whatever the giant publication is. But what they don't understand is if they're not a big name already, they need to get in some of these local outlets. They need to get in some of these middle to bottom tier, websites and publications, so they can build up their credibility, build out their profile, so then they're easier to pitch, so reporters see them as more established media figures. So talk a little bit more about media credibility, and what are some tips that you see on how someone can build their media credibility from the ground up?
Yeah, the biggest thing is trusting your PR professional. I think there has to be a relationship built on trust. And if I'm giving you an opportunity, I'm giving it to you because I know that it's worth your time versus I'm giving it to you because it makes my life easier. And then it comes back to relationships too. If you have a publicist or a PR professional in general that they have good relationships, you're more likely to be placed in those outlets. But someone starting from the ground up, does it happen that they're in Forbes in 2 weeks? Yeah, it does for sure. But it's definitely not the norm. And so taking every opportunity, I look at it like stepping stones. If I give you something that's very, very small, maybe next week we're going to get in something just a little bit bigger. And we kind of build and build and build until we get to the Wall Street Journal, the Forbes. And it's funny that you mentioned that how people want it overnight. It's because people will get on onboarding calls, Ryan. I'm sure you've seen this where I say, what are your target publications? And one of the first one is always Forbes.
Joe Rogan's
and so
podcast
setting
is probably
expectations
popular too. Yeah.
Yeah, very, very. So I think it's just setting expectations with your clients. It's definitely not going to happen overnight, but if you have a good PR team and a PR team that you can trust, you're going to get there. It just might not be overnight.
Yeah, one of the final things I want to bring up, and as we've onboarded clients into our PR ecosystem, I've noticed a few hurdles, not with us, but mostly on the client side, where they don't have time, right? It's these everyday business owners that are inside the operations, doing everything that goes into running a business, and they just do not have time to come back to us when a lot of these, reporters want answers by end of day, 1 day, 2 days. It's very quick turnaround as I try to get these stories live. So talk about that a little bit. When a hurdle is a client or a business owner is too busy in their day-to-day, what are some things that they can do to kind of offset that but still take advantage of these big media opportunities?
Yeah, well, first thing I'll say is I come from a big agency setting where every client was onboarded and not necessarily looked at in their time that they had to dedicate to PR. So I've done this a lot where I get a client, maybe they're really good for PR, but they don't have the time, but they were onboarded anyways. And so when I get on these calls with clients, I always lay out expectations of what that time commitment looks like. And it's all about communication with your PR team, being able to say, hey, I can't make this deadline. And that's okay. We can go back to the reporter and we can say, okay, they can't make this deadline, but we also can't keep pushing it either. We're on their time. So I always tell clients we're on the reporter's time and we have to just work with it, whether it works for your schedule or not. So one thing that is really important to know is if you trust your PR team, we can ghostwrite for you and we can get those things done. And that's, again, goes back to trust. There's a common theme here. You have to trust the person you're working with, because if I have a client, they don't have time, I can ghostwrite for you and I can get you still in that publication, but you kind of have to trust me. So that's definitely one option. And then the other thing is just maybe setting aside X amount of hours or after work or whatever to do these opportunities and having a set time every day that you're working on the things that we're sending
you. And
it
does pay off. I've definitely been in that boat where I have a 10-hour work day and then it feels like homework again, like I'm in school, like I have these report for consumer affairs due. I had one on Medium the other day on a Sunday, but I'm playing the long-term game in my mind where I know if I put in the work and dedicate 30 minutes to an hour on this PR pitch and PR responses, it's going to pay off for me in the long run with the backlink and all the backlinks that pop up, and who knows who sees it at that point too. But the final question, Audrey, I want to bring to you is with 2023 and as we move into 2024 with PR, with your experience, what would you say is your biggest PR win so far?
In terms of outlet?
You can name outlet. You can just say in general, whatever in your mind is your biggest PR win or wins.
I would definitely say my biggest PR win to date right now is having my client in 4 different articles in Daily Express, which is a huge outlet in the UK. That's definitely my biggest win thus far in my career. One thing I did want to touch on too is that when you have a PR professional that can prove their results, that's the one you want to go with. You don't ever want to be with an agency that's guaranteeing results but can't prove it to you. So that's food for thought.
For sure.
Too.
And on my end looking in, from my perspective, from an SEO guy, I would say your biggest win for our medical client was Medical News Today and Epic Times. And the reason I say that is I'm looking at just from a purely backlink perspective. The Medical News Today link that you got for our cash-based medical client, 90 DR, extremely relevant. That link alone is probably $3,000 to $5,000 for people who don't understand how much these backlinks cost when you're talking big boy publications and big boy sites. So I just want to give you kudos for that, looking at it from an SEO side of things.
Yeah, that's insane. It's insane how much they cost. And it's definitely one of those things where if you build that relationship again with the reporters, your client is almost their go-to source all the time. And I think that client specifically has seen that play out in real time where they're constantly their go-to source. So that's our job, is to build you to be that go-to source for all these publications.
Absolutely. And guys, Audrey is the complete opposite of a marketing quack. And that's all I had for this episode of the Marketing Quacks podcast. Appreciate you all joining on and listening to Audrey's expertise in PR. Audrey, do you have any final remarks on PR or anything else you want to add before we end the show?
I'll end it with just finding an agency you can trust. I pride myself in this team on being transparent with our clients. And so I think that's my biggest piece of advice, is just finding an agency that you can trust, a PR team you can trust. And if you do that and you're committed to PR, it's definitely worth the outcome.
Absolutely. Well, thanks again for your time, Audrey. Thanks again for everyone listening. And be sure to tune in to the next episode of the Marketing Quacks podcast.